are live. Welcome back to another Endless Report, episode 13, I believe. Bit of an unlucky number there, but not too much of an unlucky week this week. We have a ton of gaming news to cover, so we're just going to hop right into it like always. But first, we want to introduce ourselves like always as well. I'm Tony, your host. Welcome back to the Endless Report. And of course, I also have Ben with me today as well. How's it going, Ben?
Good, and I'm glad to be back after having to miss a few of these.
Glad to have you back, and I'm always happy to hear your opinions and hear your thoughts and bounce all these games and stuff off you. So it's great to have you back on the report. But like I said, like usual, we're kind of going to hop right into it today because we got a lot to cover, and I want to make the most use of this time because there's so many great games and stuff that we want to talk about here. Some other stuff as well. But before we get into Summer Games Fest, there was like one headline yesterday I did want to talk about that came out of kind of the Games Fest coverage that I thought was interesting before we get into all of these game titles. So if you give me 1 second here, I'll pull that up. So here we go. So this is Xbox announcing Project Moorcroft, yesterday, which is aiming to create the E3 show floor experience on Game Pass, as they say it. So to kind of put that in context before we get into it, it's mostly if you remember what we talked about a few weeks ago back on the new PlayStation Plus announcement where they talked about their game demo feature, it's very similar to that. In essence, what they're saying about the E3 show floor is they're kind of comparing it to the old experience on the E3 show floor where you'd go, maybe you were an industry insider, maybe you were just playing another developer, and you'd go to a developer's booth, you'd maybe have a game demo right there in front of you, you'd be playing, and you'd probably have a developer right in your ear saying, here, you should try that, or go grab that, or use that weapon, this direction, etc. And kind of having that one-to-one game playing experience as like a preview for a game and then giving that feedback to the developers directly. So Xbox is kind of aiming to fill that void here that E3 has left by kind of giving a virtual analogy, if you will, there on the Xbox Game Pass side by having a virtual demo experience where publishers can publish a game demo before release, get that audience feedback, and then put that into their final product. But I'm curious to see your thoughts on this, Ben. I want to just go over this briefly before I get into the Game Fest stuff because I'm curious to see how we have the new PlayStation Plus launching this week actually, which I forgot that was still still launching this week in the States. So I believe that's the 13th. So I think that's Monday. So it's coming up pretty fast. We're gonna see how that's gonna work into all these new releases and their demos. But now Xbox is answering back with that, a similar yet kind of different context here for their demo system. So I'm curious to see your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, no, I mean I think it's a great idea. I mean, especially if it is kind of revolving around these big events that you would typically see. So I know, like, if they make a push for the E3 period right now and like Gamescom in the August, later half of the year block, like getting those options out there for people to be able to do that. I think that's great. It reminds me a lot of the Steam Next Fest, which I think is typically more on the indie, lower budget, side. It can help drum up a lot of excitement for your game. And in Microsoft's case, one of the big things I've talked about with Sony is like it takes time to develop that demo. But to hear Microsoft say they plan on giving financial compensation for people, for developers to do this, like, okay, that pretty much answers the only problem I had is, it won't be a gamble on the developer side. And for smaller developers, that, is easily outweighs the risk at that point. Bigger companies would do whatever they want to do anyway. But yeah, I mean that was pretty much my only complaint or question mark with Sony's pushing for it, making it mandatory.
Which is a little more extreme than the Xbox case here, which they're not doing the same.
Right, it's not mandatory, and if you get invited to do it and do it, you'll have some financial compensation for it. And from a player perspective, irrelevant between the two of them, but from a developer perspective, easily makes the Xbox and Game Pass so much more exciting to work with.
I would have to agree there, and it's funny you say that, especially as we talked about PlayStation Plus the last time, and I kind of made a comment like, well, just again, Sony's saying they're not directly competing with Game Pass here. This PlayStation Plus system's a little different, but now again, as we obviously continue talking about what they're offering, like these demo features, like the game releases, it's obviously competing in some sense, and in this case here, this really is a direct answer, I think, at least in my opinion, to what Sony's doing. And again, I'm not saying it had to be reactionary. I mean, maybe this could have been in the works at Xbox for a long time. I'm not aware of that. I wouldn't want to, not give them credit for that idea or anything like that by any means. But I do think this is a direct answer to exactly what PlayStation is doing there. And again, answering those flaws and some of those questions there that you would have as a developer of how is this going to be implemented? How is that going to be mandatory and still not affect, the development of the game with the extra work that entails? So
Yep.
Xbox came out with this little interview panel video kind of explaining it, where I believe Sarah Bond of Xbox said, yeah, we get that. And we hear those concerns, and here's our answer. We're going to compensate those developers for that extra work. We understand we're asking more of them. And at the same time, they're going to get that helpful feedback, and they're going to get, some profit there from that Game Pass demo release. So they really do kind of have a good system of mind. And again, that's optional. You don't have to make a demo if you don't want to. So that's something you could take on as a developer if you choose, versus on PlayStation, you're kind of locked into this system. It seems like if you're developing a normal $60 around price AAA game with that $34 limit they had, it was kind of a cutoff of above that you have to produce a demo that we said last time. So there definitely is a direct kind of comparison you can make here. So I don't want to play that whole like PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass aren't the same thing, because they really are pushing. That's why this PlayStation Plus is existing, to push towards that same Game Pass market. Although Sony obviously has a different focus there, but it's clear they're expanding into all these other areas, and we're going to see a lot more of this kind of competing policy type business here, I think, at least in my opinion. But I thought that was an interesting thing to cover before we got into everything today.
Yeah, I mean, I said, they're not. I guess an interesting thing is, for a player perspective or a customer perspective, you're not Microsoft's offering money behind the scenes. But actually, I'll walk that back a bit, because you might, if it was on PlayStation and have to make mandatory demo and all that stuff, or with Microsoft, who's going to pay you to do that. If you're already making a demo for Steam Next Fest, you're 3 of the 4 big areas that you can sell games at this point are either encouraging or mandating of some kind. Microsoft and Steam kind of encouraging it because of the positives that can come with it. It's interesting to see the industry kind of circle back around to offering demos again, where 20 years ago they were really common on demo discs and magazines, and then they kind of died out, and now all of a sudden that idea is making a return. But again, there's a lot of talk we have whether demos positively or negatively can affect your sales, but with Microsoft again offering some financial incentive there, it again for the AA level, development group, that financial incentive can make all the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you touched on there about having the old demo disc model of like, I don't know, there was those demo discs where it's like, do I really need to buy this game? I could just play the same demo level over and over. I love this. As a kid, the demo discs were sometimes a hindrance maybe in sales. So that definitely is a conversation that maybe will be resurging as we see this kind of virtual demo model come into play again. So I'm curious to see again how that plays out in this new landscape of gaming and this kind of virtual, ecosystem we have going on, and how that will play into game development. Again, game delays and game development and crunch time and all of that has been a very, very active topic in the industry, especially these past few years, about rethinking, this isn't just the way things work, but why do things work this way? And what are the, most ideal ways that certain, different types of teams can deliver games. And I think that as time goes on and as the industry continues to evolve, like you said, especially for like an indie game developer or developer, where you have to think about things like that price point on Sony's side, where you're not sure if you're going to be above or below that threshold, maybe if you're an independent studio, and that may weigh into your decision whether or not you're going to develop for that platform. And I think that as we move forward, we're going to see, as we'll get into the games here today as well, there's some indie games we're going to cover for sure, how these games kind of jump from platform to platform. You see some games being Xbox exclusive, some games only on PlayStation. You see PC and Switch, sometimes a combo. You see a lot of different combos here. So I'm curious to see how things like that will continue to impact smaller developers. But I hope that things can become more net positives, and there can be more tools to enable easier and more conducive development cycles in that way. But I could drone on about that all day. So I want to let us get into game announcements in a moment here. So I'm going to pull up some of our articles here. I want to give a quick shout out to IGN here, who's come up with some compilation lists of all the past announcements from these past conferences, because it would be probably a nightmare for me to have about 80 different tabs open for this podcast as we go game to game. So we're going to be going through these IGN summary lists. I want to shout out for those. Thank you very much there. But we're going to start off, I guess let's just start off right with the start of the conference here. So as you can see from that chopped off art there, we're going to skip through here a bit, but Street Fighter 6 was what started off the Summer Games Fest conference here. And we'll let that ad run for a second, as we probably will have to a few times. But I do think I want to just comment on this real quick. I know we probably don't have that much more to say about it. This was something I talked about last week's episode during the State of Play PlayStation conference, where that game was revealed fully, really, after the reveal trailer, and pretty much gave us all that was shown here at Summer Games Fest and more. So I'm kind of not sure exactly how the thought process was here at Summer Games Fest. We did get one new character, I believe, but a lot of the similar gameplay and even less of that kind of hub gameplay we saw last week that I touched on. So I just wanted to cover that in the beginning here quick. I don't know if you have any more thoughts on Street Fighter here, Ben. I think it looks great. I mean, I'm not a huge fighting game fan myself. I have said that on past reports, so I can't give the most insight here. But you have Ryu there. He's like looking brand new, fresh, new graphics. I think it looks great. I'm curious to see how the move sets and everything and how the fighting community is going to react to this game, on the technical level.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm not a huge fighting game person. I'm a button masher at heart when it comes to fighting games, and I don't personally have any interest in it. But I hope, ultimately that, whatever state the game comes out, it's what the community wants.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I know there's a huge esports community around, fighting games and Street Fighter in general. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of developments there on the competition aspects and people learning new movesets. So I'm excited for everyone who's into that to get started with Street Fighter 6 there. But again, I just want to give kind of a disclaimer. Like we just said, I do want to talk about as many games as we possibly can today. Obviously, Ben and I will probably gravitate towards more games than others, but especially these big releases as well, we want to cover for sure. But we're probably not going to be able to cover every single game in full detail. So we're going to keep going here with that. But that being said, I do want to get into a lot of detail on our next game, because then we had The Last of Us Part 1, The Last of Us multiplayer, and The Last of Us TV show. So a lot of Last of Us announcements yesterday. Unfortunately, just to give us some context here, there was a large leak yesterday morning. It wasn't a fan leak. It wasn't a hack or anything like that. It was directly from PlayStation Direct, unfortunately. So yesterday morning before Summer Game Fest, they did post the full page for The Last of Us Part 1, which is a full remake, not a remaster of the original Last of Us, which we've been talking about, I think, a bit. We've brought this up in past episodes. I'm not sure, but I feel like I'm talking about this a lot. But this has been a rumor for a long time. Finally officially revealed. We got a trailer. We have a release date. We have a special edition. We have a lot more to talk about. So unfortunately, that was revealed yesterday morning before the showcase, but then we finally did get this trailer. And I am old enough to watch this trailer. IGN, thank you for confirming. So we're going to start that here. But yes, we did get that trailer finally at Summer Games Fest, along with some other info. But as I start that trailer, Ben, I want to hear some of your thoughts on The Last of Us. I definitely have some thoughts as well, all about this drop, as well as just the game and that franchise in general.
yeah, I mean,
take it away.
I'll start off with the easy one. I mean, a show, cool. I did enjoy the world that it set up. It felt like a very real, version of this kind of apocalypse scenario. So I'm cool, and they're not just zombies. So as far as the show goes, I'm all for it. I'll probably watch it when it it actually airs on HBO. And the multiplayer game, cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's I'm all for it. Let's do it. The remake though, I'm a little more lukewarm on. I mean, I don't think anybody can really deny, the graphical update that it's gotten compared to the first. But it's just one of those things like, is this really needed?
Mm-hmm.
I think I've said it before, and I'll say it again if we talk about The Witcher 3 remaster for modern consoles and PC. Like, it just doesn't feel. I don't want to say lazy, because there's a ton of effort going into it, but it just feels safe. it just feels really, really safe, and that's, I don't know, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed more than anything. Um, and I know they're going to make the gameplay a lot more like the second one, which I haven't played, but I've heard,
Mhm.
from a gameplay feel is better, which is cool. But again, it feels like it's perfectly fine as it is now. Is there? I'm
So I'm
curious.
pulling up here these
Was there
screenshot
fan demand?
comparisons. So I can. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed your last question there.
I was gonna say, I mean, it just compare it to something like Bloodborne that people want to see either remastered or remade or updated so it performs better on modern consoles,
Mhm.
or possibly even brought to PC. Like, was there fan demand for this? Because if there was, I clearly wasn't looking in the right place.
Yeah. And it's funny enough, I must have this conversation about a year or two ago with a friend of mine who we were talking when this first was a rumor or a leak. I mean, a year or two ago, this was leaked for the first time. This might be a thing, and of course, it was true. And just to give my preamble here, I did play The Last of Us 2. It's been a while since I played the original, but I am a fan of the franchise for sure. So I wanted to bring up these comparison shots here as well as I talk because when I first saw this trailer, especially when I first saw this trailer, I kind of had the same thoughts of like, hey, this looks great, but this is The Last of Us again. But I think it is important to not to discredit from what we're saying at all, because I'm going to continue talking on that, whether or not it's merited or not. But I did want to show these comparisons here. So this was the original game. I'm showing a screenshot, then the update. Again, you're kind of graphically there. You're not seeing a lot of difference, but you are seeing the art style. Especially if you're familiar with Last of Us 2, really changed The Last of Us 2 and be very consistent, especially they had some no spoilers to that game, but they do kind of flash back a bit to some of the elements of the first game where you could see these characters kind of shot for shot, how they do look different from their counterparts. So I do want to show some more screenshots here. This one's very indicative. This was from the original trailer, and then to the new ones. You could see they're very much updating the rigs here for these animations for these character models. I believe they're using the exact same performances from the original game. They confirmed during the conference yesterday. So they had the original actors there, Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And the same performances from the original game. So if you're a fan of that story, if you're a fan of that, the dramatic performance there, it's exactly the same. Where they're just using updated rigs here and some new motion capture technology to kind of adapt those old motion capture tracks to this new setting. So some more shots here again, kind of just going over all of these new shots. But I just wanted to use those as a kind of a visual background there. But I do think now in this context, like here's where I gotta get into like my opinion on it. I do think there is a place for this game. I do think, like you said, well, there are questions of, is this necessary? Is it absolutely necessary? No, I'm not going to say it is. That being said, I do want to reiterate, this isn't just a remaster for PS5. It's coming to PC as well, which is interesting. I talked about last week how we had Spider-Man coming to PC, which I thought was very unexpected from them. And about 2 weeks before that, or a week before that on the analyst report, we talked about how Sony is expecting about $300 million in PC profit in the next year or two. And we were like, where is that coming from exactly? So here's where that's probably coming from. I'm sure a large PC audience is going to want to play the Last of Us series. So that's going to be a whole new market for it. So I guess that in its own is kind of its own warrant for a re-release. That being said, I have played The Last of Us 2 extensively, and opinions aside of that game, I know there's a lot of controversy about that game. That game got leaked online as well. So a lot of tough history for The Last of Us here with leaks. That game got leaked in full before that game's release. So really unfortunate the past few years with The Last of Us having those issues there. But again, I know I'm getting on a million tangents here, but I do think that The Last of Us remake has that place. Not only being that PC port, but for people who didn't play the original, having played the second game, that gameplay and the animation systems is really something that I've never seen in another game before. And not to be too hyperbolic, it really is incredible. Some of the technical things that Last of Us 2 pulls off. So to see that they're saying they're going to update some combat sections, they're going to have all those physics and that combat mechanics of Last of Us 2 and the original, it's honestly very exciting. And there is a little fatigue with the series to me. I've been talking about it a lot. I have played them before. I've been talking about the show a lot on these shows, especially in the past few weeks. But that first game, it still really is something super special. And I think seeing that in all its glory and this PS5 with DualSense features and these new graphics and that Last of Us 2 engine, I hate to say it, I'm going to be buying it. I know I think it's charging $70, which is in my opinion, the real kind of, I think, where it's kind of gets egregious for an older game. I know it is a full remake, but I think the $70 price point is where some people, especially who bought it already, will be a little wary, I believe. But in terms of the remake, not even getting into the other two Last of Us announcements, in terms of that remake, I'm open to it. And like you said, it seems like a safe move when there may not be other releases this fall. We're going to talk about God of War Ragnarok, I'm sure, again in the coming weeks, but that's still up in the air for 2022. Again, we have Last of Us now in September, so maybe we'll see that later in the year, but they're not going to want to fight against their own release, and maybe this is kind of something to hold us over if that gets delayed and we don't have a big fall from Sony. But
yeah, and I mean, to be a little bit cynical, it also probably doesn't hurt that they do have the show coming out and they're going to be releasing 2 games around that
exactly,
period. Like that has to either have helped influence the decision, I would guess,
100%.
because it's when you think of it in terms of marketing beats, September, I think he said, I can't remember. Yeah, September.
Yeah.
Last of Us One remake comes out, then I think the show just finished wrapping, so
You got a
let's
trailer
say
maybe late
eight,
2022?
eight to 9 months from now. So probably 3 to 4 months after that, the show might come out, and then when the show's done, or at some point during the show, the multiplayer one will probably come out. Like it is a good stream of consistent marketing beats for it. But again, that would also be a lot of Last of Us in a very
Agreed.
short period of time. So that it could be a double-edged sword where you people that either didn't get it or got it and just want to replay it, get the remake, and then they watch a bit of the show, and then by the time the multiplayer game comes out, some people are just probably going to be sick of it. But
Yeah, and hopefully, for their sake at least, that's not the case. But I do want to bring up this image here showing some concept art from the game. So a little disappointing we didn't get any more information on this multiplayer game, having heard about it, saying, maybe next year you'll hear about it for the last 2 years now. So that has been something that was officially commented on. This was originally going to be the Factions multiplayer for The Last of Us 2. Similar to Factions multiplayer in the original game that I actually really enjoyed. That was something I played at the time quite a bit. Very tactical, slower paced multiplayer game, but seeing that's going to be evolving into a large, maybe, seemingly open world scale. We see here it's believably San Francisco. You can see the Golden Gate Bridge in the background there. So we're going to have an open multiplayer type, looks like kind of like open world community type environment. You're probably going to have, the zombies roaming around the map, enemy players, different quests, because there is going to be a story mode, they have said. So that's the headline there. They did say on stage yesterday there will indeed be a story mode and some interactions and updates to that game. And they have said it is as big, if not bigger, than The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 in terms of content like that. So it's not just going to be, again, like they said in the past, this game has been growing and growing bigger and bigger than they ever anticipated in the beginning. So it's going to be its own release, standalone. But again, just bringing that into context, like you said, I kind of thought this yesterday of, again, you got a remake out before the show is out, so you have everybody has somewhat of a chance to be caught up or at least recap on the series at whole. Then you have this TV show coming out, which is apparently going to be really faithful to the game, as I said yesterday. They're obviously very excited about it from Naughty Dog, who has seen the adaptation of their stories. Neil Druckmann, the game director of The Last of Us, was obviously he was very excited about the show. It seemed yesterday on the show, but of course, I'm sure he would be either way in that context. But it did seem like he genuinely was very excited that portrayal of his story come to life in that way. So I am excited for that. And like I always mention with this show, every time we talk about it, which seems like a lot now on the Endless Report, every time I bring this up is that it is confirmed to still be the biggest HBO budget basically ever. They're spending more money on this first season, or have already spent more money on that first season than the entire last season of Game of Thrones. So I think it's something to really keep in mind, where even if you're not a fan of the series, if you don't really have that context yet, I've been bugging my friends and family who is into HBO and stuff like that for a while, saying get ready for this show because it's going to be a huge cultural phenomenon. So like you said, there will be a lot of we're going to be highly saturated in Last of Us content probably come 2023. So I'm curious to see if there's some burnout there, or maybe it's fresh for a lot of people, and maybe there is just so much of that buzz around it for people that aren't like me, have been talking about it for the last 10 years. So I think once that game comes out, maybe you pull that live services approach. I believe this is going to be one of those live service titles Sony has talked about being in development. This is probably one of the 10 they mentioned. I think they're going to be keen to have show related content. Now, I don't know how intertwined that is going to have to be, But I do think that, like Fortnite having all these pop cultural references by each season, they have, when Obi-Wan Kenobi show comes out, you have Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. When the Marvel movie comes out, you have all the Marvel superheroes, you have Uncharted, you have every big game release in the past couple of months has been a part of Fortnite. So I think if you take from that, again, that's kind of the gold standard for a live service game at the moment. I think if you take from that approach and kind of incorporate maybe its environments or characters or factions or things like that from the TV show, that subsequently maybe from the original game as well. If you can kind of incorporate ideas across those platforms and have some of that, again, brand synergy I kind of talk about a lot here on the show, I think that could be really interesting. And I feel like a lot of these bigger brands are kind of going towards that multifaceted marketing tactic of having multiple media outputs for one brand. And Sony's definitely buying into that with all of their dozens, I feel like 9 TV shows I think they have now in the works, something crazy like that. So definitely going to see a lot more of that integration, I feel like. But that's kind of my last thoughts on the multiplayer game and the show itself.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll depend on the form it takes, and obviously, if it only comes out on PlayStation, I'll give it a pass because I don't have a PS5 and I don't really have the urge to go buy one. If it comes to PC and it ends up being like a cooperative style, like kind of game where like it is this open world and you're gonna come across other players and you typically want to work together, like that'd be cool. I'd be up for giving it a shot. But until we actually get something more than concept art, it's all speculative. It could be good, could be boring, could be a very bog standard live service, or it could be amazing.
Yeah.
We'll just have to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm hopeful for the latter. Again, I'm obviously a fan of the first 2 games and the mechanics, especially the gameplay of the second game is something that I know you said you haven't played it, but the gameplay mechanics there and the animations are something that I really have never seen in that kind of form in another game, period. So to see if that can naturally evolve and again, not be, if they have the content and the story to really give that gameplay some, weight to it, I have a lot of hype and potential for it. I think it could be great. But again, I don't want to get too excited about anything these days, but I do think it is. I do want to note that I am excited for that. Kind of transitioning here. I want to keep on the kind of sci-fi track here with announcements. We're going to get a lot more announcements here in the next a half hour or so in the rest of the show here. But this is a game that I wanted to touch on really briefly because another popular franchise. It's the Aliens franchise. So we're getting a new Aliens game. I believe Aliens Colonial Marines is the title, if I'm not mistaken, was the old game the last Aliens game I have played, rather, I should say, that was to an extent, had some criticisms in that game. It wasn't the best, most popular shooter, I would say at the time. There were some criticisms, but this game kind of looks to me like a natural evolution of that title. Again, it looks like to be another first-person shooter. We just get a cinematic trailer here, but you get what looks like to be some sort of a human kind of zombie type enemy here, as well as the traditional alien classic monster alien there. But I'm curious to see how this game's going to pan out. I believe this is coming. We'll wait for the end of the trailer here because it's too many games to remember release dates here, unfortunately. But if I skip through here, we're getting our alien gameplay here. I believe that's later this year, 2023. Okay, so I don't want to assume anything there, but late next year we're gonna get that new aliens title. But again, a lot of kind of like sci-fi space titles. So I'm going to keep kind of skimming through this article here. Just briefly, we did have a screenshot of that Last of Us TV show. I want just to show that briefly. That's Pedro Pascal there. And I believe, getting a little advertisement here, unfortunately. But I'll transition from that again. So as I work that out. But yeah, so we got our first screenshot there. They're again just kind of taking cover, if you saw. So basically kind of showing a little bit of a gameplay element there. You do a lot of taking cover in The Last of Us. So kind of on the nose there. But yeah, we get that screenshot. We also get a lot more sci-fi titles. So again, another title that we have talked about last week, which again, this was the second title they showed in the showcase of Street Fighter, which is another title that was also at State of Play last week, which is the Callisto Protocol. And I'm bringing that trailer up now as we get through this. But to kind of introduce here, they did show us an extended gameplay demo. So we did get more than we got last week at the PlayStation State of Play, thankfully. That being said, again, another game we've already seen already. I did want to mention, I had an article before the summer showcase that Jeff Keighley, the host of Game Fest, did mention that this is going to be a lot of already announced games. So just keep that in mind. There are a few surprises here, but we're just getting a lot more details on some already announced titles here. But you get some really gritty, brutal kind of gameplay here from the Callisto Protocol. Again, speaking of Dead Space, we just talked about it. This is again like you said, kind of an indie developer here, someone who the original creator of Dead Space, I should note that I noted last week, going in and creating a new kind of spiritual successor, if you will, but kind of a new vision for that kind of type of game. I think this one's kind of funny in the context of EA remaking Dead Space in a very tight release window close to this one. So I'm curious to see how I said this last week. Curious to see how that's kind of going to play off each other, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I love it. I mean, I love the whole situation.
Yeah,
Swear to God, somebody was in a van outside my house when I was like 16, coming up with an idea. Because like 6 months later, Dead Space came out, and it was almost the exact idea I had. No, but it was. I mean, I love the first Dead Space game. The whole dismembering instead of just going for the head to kill. And then the different monsters that would come up. So you had to learn how you essentially had to learn how to take down each monster, because sometimes taking out the legs would make them faster, because then they'd use their extra arms to like super crawl across the room. It's incredible. I'm less excited for the remake just because EA's not my favorite group, and but seeing Callisto Protocol, I am 100% going to be picking this up. I think because it's just that the perfect, it's the poster child to me, and we'll probably talk more about this once we get to Frost Giant, but it is that poster child, of a company or a group, a creative group wanted to make a certain game, and for whatever reason, the company that owns them wanted to push it in a different direction. Dead Space obviously got a lot more action oriented as it went along. To be an action shooter, in Dead Space 3 with a creepy element to it versus being a horror game. So, man, to see the original creative people behind it putting out what they wanted to do with it, with no real, fear of, like, if this turns more shooter, if the Callisto Protocol comes out and it's great, and a Callisto Protocol sequel comes out and it starts getting more shooter again, maybe EA would be less to blame there. I'm hesitant on that though. I think it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, and I think the same thing. I'm excited for it. I mean, I don't know if you noticed when you were talking there, Ben. I think the audience may have seen. I kind of chuckled with that dismemberment there. It's really brutal. It's really in your face, and it seems like like you said, kind of a developer there of for whatever reason, it seems like EA wanted Dead Space to go in a different direction. So you're kind of getting that original intent here. I'm not saying it's a rehash or anything like that, but rather a modern, really all in type approach to that kind of game that those creators really want to make. So that whole just saying that right there as it is already exciting. And again, Dead Space 1 remake again is still that, you could say it's that original vision, that remake. I'm curious to see how that's going to play out for that game. There was a lot of excitement around that before the Callisto Protocol really got into the public eye. So I think that, for especially for a Dead Space fan, I think that's an interesting dilemma there. I think many like you will want to go with the original creator's vision here and check out the Callisto Protocol. But again, I believe I'm flip-flopping here. I believe one comes out in mid-December, and one comes out right at the beginning of January. So it's going to be a very interesting release window to have two of these. Basically, essentially, the remake of the first game, and then essentially the real spiritual, almost reboot remake of that first game of the series. It's kind of funny to see that happen in almost a direct head-to-head competition like that. So again, I think it's great that you brought that up, because it is definitely a very notable dynamic there. It's interesting.
I'll be really sad if for whatever reason the remake just absolutely smashes the Callisto Protocol. I'll be really sad. I won't, I'll play my hand here and say that I really hope Callisto Protocol just nails it out of the park, and by comparison the remake is just really bought by those hardcore Dead Space fans. But I want Callisto Protocol to receive all the love.
I agree. Excuse me, I was coughing there, but I do want to move on with the show. I know I'm super excited for Callisto Protocol as well, but we have so much more to cover still. So as I pull up this trailer here, we're just letting these advertisements run on my end so I could give you the trailer right from the beginning. We got some Call of Duty gameplay here. I want to just touch on this briefly. I know we cover Call of Duty a lot just because it's one of those games where You can't really ignore it. It's there every year, but this one is this one I'm actually personally as someone who played a good amount of Call of Duty when I was younger. The original Modern Warfare 2. I mean, I was 12 years old when that game came out, so probably every single kid in my middle school was playing that game every night after school. It was like a phenomenon. It was like the whole world was playing that game to me when I was younger. So to kind of see that game kind of come back, be rebooted again, of course, Modern Warfare. The series has been rebooted in 2019. We're getting the sequel to that reboot, and essentially they're going all in with just kind of remarketing that Modern Warfare 2 aesthetic. They have that kind of neon green style that the original game had. I believe back in 2012, it was 2010. I believe 2010, but my memory fails me sometimes there. But we see we're just getting some campaign gameplay here. I'll probably skip through this a bit because I'm going to wrap this up fairly quickly here. But very, very reminiscent of the older games. There's actually a oil rig mission just like this on the original game where you're kind of going in with this kind of stealth approach and going through it. So I did want to kind of emphasize how there's so much nostalgia basically here from me. A lot of interesting stuff here. The graphics look amazing. I did want to note, unfortunately, which we probably can't hear on the stream, but if you want to check out the gameplay online, we'll have it linked later on. But you know, you can find it anywhere really. But the audio design here, just right there when you saw that, you know, him going through these enemies, you hear the way you hear people thump on the. I mean, sounds very disturbing and visceral describing this but I'm just describing a video game to be clear here. But the way these enemies are dropping and stuff, it just the sound is so realistic that it kind of gave me chills. I was like, oh, this is almost, you know, it was very very visceral and very interesting to see the sound design there. So I just wanted to point that out since you can't really hear that if you're viewing this on stream. But that being said, again, I'll continue to skip through this a bit. A lot of nostalgic elements were here from missions from Modern Warfare 2. Again, you have that breach and clear element that was very prominent in that game. So you're kind of getting that again here as well with some updated movements. We see some different kind of movement. I see almost like a sliding. I believe they said there's diving and sliding as well, similar to the Black Ops games. So it looks like this year is going to be a big moment for Call of Duty in general. They're on a brand new engine. And really what I wanted to talk about here before we wrap it up is just my concerns basically with this title. I did enjoy Modern Warfare 2019, but I did feel that when they launched Warzone and kind of took over that application, they put it all in the same app, and it became like this 300 gigabyte kind of bloated application with 4 different games in one. And there was really no way to kind of fight around that problem. Again, you could delete things, but you did get forced to download them in the first place. So if you didn't have great internet, it really was like kind of a tough game to really stay into without downloading these huge updates periodically. And so I'm hoping here, the way they said it yesterday was still broad, so I'm not sure what the answer is to this question, but I want to bring it up. How they did mention that Warzone 2 will be a separate entity, but they did mention how fans of Warzone 1 will still have a standalone experience, but Warzone 2, you know, will be separate. So I'm not sure if that means Warzone 2 is just separate to the original game, but it's still, you know, attached to Modern Warfare 2, or if it's its own app this time. I'm really hoping it's the latter. I really don't want that to be something that is thwarting people from playing either game. I hope they can both just get the attention they deserve and kind of have room to breathe there. But other than that, that's really most of what I wanted to cover on Call of Duty. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this franchise as well, Ben.
Oh man, I played both Battlefield and Call of Duty, you know, a decade plus ago. It looks good, and I know hopefully towards the end of the summer I'll be doing a really big PC refresh. I've got a computer I built in 2016 that's still going strong, but I'm
That's
looking
exciting.
forward to upgrading. And this would be visually it looks like the perfect game to test that. Unfortunately, I just don't buy Activision games anymore for a lot
I
of
hear you.
personal reasons.
I hear you on
Um,
that.
I again though, you know, like I said with Street Fighter, I personally won't be buying this, but for the people that Call of Duty's their thing, I really hope that this is, you know, everything people want in it.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. And again, that is a tough call. I appreciate you saying that because that is important to know. We have talked about that a bunch on the show beforehand in the past, especially when the Activision stories were more prominent in the news. But it's not something I want to forget about or gloss over. But I do want to note again, like I obviously was a Call of Duty fan when I was younger. I haven't really played these games. I mean, I have tried these games in recent years, but I really have not been a player of Call of Duty for the past few years here in terms of the way this franchise has changed. And in reference, of course, to that, the Activision you know, situations there. I have not been very eager to buy Activision games as well either. I actually do have a friend of mine who actually is now working on this game as well. So I think I do want to support the developers that, you know, are putting time and effort and love and care into this game that had nothing to do with previous ongoings at Activision. So I do want to note that, but I do share some of the same feelings there, that it is tough to not take that into context. I don't think you can without taking that into the context. So definitely just wanted to note on that there. But I do want to give a shout out to the people that are putting their love and passion into these games when all of these, these scandals and these launches and other things that maybe have nothing to do with gaming in general, but we do want to show, our appreciation for the people that put their time, effort, and care into these projects. At the same time there, I thank you for saying that, because I do agree with that notion. I want to keep moving. I know we keep
Yep.
jumping and jumping here, but a lot to talk about. We're well into the hour here. We do have some more from Summer Games Fest and some more from other conferences after Games Fest yesterday. So I'm going to keep scrolling down here on my little document. There's a few more things I think we wanted to cover in Games Fest. Again, we had some of the big ones here. There was a lot of that sci-fi horror element, so I did want to note that we did get a good amount of that kind of sci-fi horror game. I wanted to note this one title here if we could find it, but they may not have put it on their article, unfortunately, because I'm not finding it. Oh, here it is. So there was a game, Routine. I'm not going to show the trailer here because I'm just going to get through this briefly. It's only a 1-minute trailer. But this game was actually announced over 10 years ago, actually. It was just something I kind of was faintly familiar with, because I actually did see this announcement 10 years ago, but very much so forgot it until someone mentioned that again after the conference. This is a game that has been in development for a long time, but it's coming back. So we're curious to see how that's going to play out. I believe it's coming next year, but it's a sci-fi horror game based on the moon, where you're basically fighting these robots in a kind of space capsule. And I say that kind of with a smile on my face, because we got a few games yesterday that were basically the same description. It was a sci-fi horror game based in a space, or on a module on a planet or on a moon, and you're dealing with some sort of unknown horror. So I don't want to gloss over all those titles. We did get a few titles in that vein, so we'll kind of may touch on that again. But for right now, I do want to touch on two superhero-related titles, actually. So we did get some updates on both Gotham Knights, which we talked about in earlier weeks, and we did get updates on Marvel's Midnight Suns. So I think we're going to start with the Marvel title here. I'm going to pull that up in a moment. And I do want to talk about this game for a minute. I do think it's a very interesting approach they're going for with this game. So they didn't show much gameplay here, per se, during the conference, but they did show some more cinematics. We did get our first appearance of Spider-Man, and I believe he's being voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, who voices Spider-Man in the Sony PS4 and PS5 Spider-Man game. So that is cool for fans of that game to kind of see a little crossover of the same character in that interpretation. But we also get Venom, a Spider-Man villain here. So they're definitely playing into all the Spider-Man hype of the past year or two, with a lot of that IP being utilized and being fresh in the minds of many fans. So we start off the trailer here with Venom. We also get a little more preview on the enemy types and how he plays into that, and how the villains of this game play in. But more so, I just want to talk about the gameplay. I find this game very interesting, that it's basically a card-based real-time strategy game. Forgive me if I'm saying this, mistaking the words here, but it looks to be a fully fledged story. So you have narrative and you have branching storylines. Then the combat it's not real time. It's more so you're playing cards and abilities. And I try to think of games like XCOM or other strategy games like that, where it seems to be kind of in that vein, but with a card power system. Again, we did get some new heroes yesterday. We got Spider-Man here appearing in the trailer right there. And the cinematic gameplay looks awesome. Obviously, it's just a cinematic, so I don't want to – that's not too indicative of the actual gameplay, but I do want to give us a visual there in the background. But you have any thoughts on that game?
I mean, I'm all for it. I like my turn-based games, my XCOM style games. I'm really curious how this is going to end up playing out, because a lot of the XCOM games XCOM-like games that I can think of all have an element of permanent death. The whole one. A big factor of it is getting. Those are my soldiers. That's my squad that I've gone on missions with. I've gotten them leveled up. So it's I might risk something to keep this guy alive.
Yeah.
I doubt that you're going to have that element here. So I'm curious how well that translates when it's just a tactics game like that. But
yeah, I'm with you there.
It's just I don't like. I know it's a cinematic trailer, but I still don't because when I first saw it, I thought that's going to be a badass action game, like a 3D brawler, and then it's oh no, it's like an XCOM style. Oh, okay, that cinematic trailer does absolutely nothing. That always frustrates me, but
Yeah.
that's a personal point. It's just so
And
unrepresentative.
I feel like the industry always goes through that cycle of like, why are we still doing these cinematics? We need to represent the gameplay and give people, the real core experience of what to expect. And then I feel like every couple of years we kind of forget that conversation. Some people kind of forget that conversation, and then you see a bunch of new cinematics again. And I'm like, don't get me wrong, I love seeing cinematics. I think obviously they look cool, they're awesome. I love getting the vibe and the feel for a game like that, especially what I'm excited for. So I'm not saying that cinematics have no place or anything like that, but again, like you said, when you're getting a first impression of a game and something that is kind of far off from the way the gameplay is going to work, I do think it is important to have that context there. Again, I do think, like, I'm really happy you brought up what you did there about the combat system and about how other games like that, that are maybe more like XCOM or like other interpretations that are more based on your squad and having that kind of military presence of that vulnerability of your squad, and I think when you bring in superheroes into that kind of gameplay, system, you're not, again, like you said, I imagine you're not going to get the same kind of feel of vulnerability and consequences, as well as the grandiosity of their powers. Again, you're going to have to kind of subdue like most stories have to with superheroes. You're going to have to kind of constrain their powers into the context of that combat system and kind of limit them in certain ways for the story to progress properly. So that is something to keep in mind. But I do think if you're a Marvel fan, that the game is something that is exciting. It's something to be excited about. I do want to keep that on the same vein with Gotham Knights. So we're moving from Marvel to DC here. So I'm gonna pull up that trailer and get that going here. I guess of course we're getting a little buffering there, of course.
I'll go ahead
if you
and
want to
throw
start
this
off on
out
that.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. DC all the way, personally. Marvel's fine and all. DC 100% though, except for live action. For whatever reason, DC live action stuff just doesn't compare. But that aside, I'm a huge Batman fan.
Same here.
This game will probably hook me. I know there's been a few things that people have been concerned about and controversies, and like, Red Hood's combat style doesn't really match his representation in comics and all that. But man, I'm just, it's got, I'll still wait for reviews to come out. My barrier for this at this point is more, if it runs well on PC, I will probably pick it up. I don't. That honestly is probably going to be my biggest roadblock. If it just doesn't perform on PC, that's one thing. But no,
I'm curious to see how this does perform, especially with these characters. They start off every trailer with that quote, and Batman is dead, and that's like it's a very hook. It's a very hook and sinker there. But I think
is he
after
though?
that, is he though? Exactly. I'm like, that's what everybody wants to see. Where's Batman? Because that's what I think the general audience wants to know. So I'm hoping that if you're not like a Nightwing Robin fan, if you're not a fan of Red Hood and Batgirl, I hope that people that are just Batman fans in general or just DC fans in general can come together and buy it, because I think you're gonna be missing out if you're just thinking, no Batman, then I don't know about this game. I think if you're a DC fan, you should definitely keep your eyes on this for sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest disappointment is I don't think I'll have any friends that'll end up picking this game up with me. So I'll probably be playing solo, which is probably not
maybe
the
we can get some co-op going, Ben. Maybe we can get some co-op going. Then I'll see if I can get it on the computer or the Steam Deck, or I'm dying to get a Steam Deck. So if I can get that somehow in my hands, I'd love to play a game like this on that.
I would love it. And I guess the only other thing I'll say is I'll give them a lot of props if they do actually stick with the Batman's dead and Batman's actually dead, or like if he just doesn't show up in the game, the sequel game he can be alive, whatever. If they go one whole game, which is literally there is no Batman, I would give them a lot of props for that, because I'm thinking back to Marvel Avengers, like, oh, Captain America died to save everybody, and it's like, oh, but wait, you end up playing as him because he comes back. Like, no, if you're telling me Batman's dead, give me a game where Batman's dead, and it really is about the Bat family trying to, collectively, like, live up to the shadow that he cast. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I would love that.
I would too. And funny enough, I actually let that trailer run there with an advertisement, because it was an advertisement for The Boys. And I kind of thought it was kind of relevant, so I just kept it up, because that is a show that gets very nitty gritty and gets very into a lot of crazy plot lines with superheroes. And I thought that was something relevant. If you're a fan of this kind of stuff, I'm sure you're excited for The Boys. I haven't started this season yet, so
neither have I.
I'm fresh on that, and I'm excited to get back into that for sure.
I'm waiting for there to be 3 or 4 episodes out before I do it because then by
Yeah,
the time I get through it'll be like maybe 1 week that I'm waiting.
there
If
you
you don't
go.
mind, I'm gonna call out a personal
Please
game
do.
from this that I want to
Yeah.
talk about. Witchfire.
Mm,
I completely forgot about it, but I
yeah.
love I you know it, I, I'm reminded of New World in that sense of like Spanish conquistador, flintlock rifle, like mashing up
Hmm.
these really two weird genres. So it's like having this like Victorian flintlock pistol kind of setting, but with like this major fantasy vibe. I mean, Greedfall did something very similar. I love the like juxtaposition of those two, you know,
Same here. Absolutely.
aesthetics. So it's
And
like
I'm pulling that
wielding
up
this
here.
cool 6-shot revolver that fires magical bullets against these, monsters. I hope it's good, but I, yeah,
Same here. And unfortunately, I'm getting some playback errors with these videos. Again, trying to bar some technical difficulty here, so I'm going to restart that video as we talk about it. But again, like I said, I want to note on that aesthetic as well. I mean, to me, seeing that, the combination of that shooter like gameplay with this type of era and aesthetic, I think it's super cool. And something we kind of, I was going to say, we don't see very often. We kind of see something similar later in the showcase, and I'm going to see if I could pull that game up as well after this to showcase that. But again, this gameplay for some reason is not cooperating with us today. But Witchfire, if you do want to reference that, I am going to bring this up again because we're getting it now. So it is cooperating for the moment, but you're seeing some really cool looking gameplay. I love the flame elements there and the kind of I'm not sure what you call it, the kind of elemental aspect of it. I think the movement looks great. I like the magic. I just think combining a shooter looks like kind of a Doom type, aspect of that kind of like
mm-hmm.
villain type shooter. I love it. I'm all here for this. I think it looks really great. Again, we haven't seen this game in a while. I believe was it last year, the year before?
2017.
2017, yeah, so it's been a while, but I did
Yep.
remember it. I was like, oh, I remember this game. So I'm really excited to see how it looks now. I think it looks great at this point in time. I'm curious to see maybe if there's some narrative aspects here that I'm not aware of. Again, it's been a while since I've seen this game, but just an aesthetic alone. I mean, the
Yep.
footage here is speaking for itself
I
for everyone
mean,
watching.
fantasy Victorian era Doom. I mean, again, if it runs well on PC, done. I'm
Yep.
probably gonna buy it.
And there we go. That's the title there, Witchfire. Really cool logo, actually. I just want to let that show there. And it's early access soon, so I just want to point that out. It's still going to be an early access game. You can wishlist that now, I believe, on the Epic Game Store. I'm not sure if that's on
Yep.
Steam, actually. Just want to put that out
It's
there.
Epic Games only, which I
Mm,
don't have a problem with personally, but
mhm. I know, just for a consolidation thing. A lot of people love having all their stuff just in Steam. I can feel like that as well, but I have no problem if again I'm not the biggest, most active PC gamer, but I have game on PC. I have no problem going to my Xbox Game Pass or my Epic Games or back in the day Origin for my Battlefield and EA games and the like. But yeah, I mean, as long as it's accessible, as long as there's no technical problems with that, I have no problem with that. Whatsoever. I do want to see if we can find that rhythm based shooter as
Metal
well.
Hellsinger.
Metal Hellsing, exactly. I don't know if they included
It
that
is right
on
there.
this part of the article. There we go. So I'm going to bring that up as well. But this had a very similar vibe to me, so I wanted to cover these two in a row. Again, there's so many games here. We're getting towards the hour mark, so we're gonna try to start going a little quicker here. Fortunately, we can't cover everything with the depth we like to cover it with. I know I could talk forever on most of these games, but we're gonna pull this one up here because this one, Metal Singer, I thought was really cool. So we got a little intro here from the development team, talked about their love for metal, kind of being metalheads themselves, and how that plays in this game. So how this game works is that the metal soundtrack, using a lot of real artists and a lot of great songs, plays into the gameplay here. So you could see this timer kind of signal you see in the middle of the screen here on your reticle. So you actually have to time your shots to the beat of the music. And I really think this is a creative idea. I think we don't get enough rhythm games that go outside kind of the idea of just being on the rhythm of a song. I mean, you have your Guitar Heroes and your Beat Saber and the like, and I'm sure there's many other rhythm games that I'm not forgetting or not aware of that. But I think that to see one like this, that again, maybe I'm not aware of other ones that do similar twists that put this kind of twist on it. Again, a lot of shooters at the show yesterday, just to point that out again. But having a shooter like this with this again kind of medieval hellscape type Doom looking kind of vibe with that musical element, I'm sure, like we said before, that Doom has a really high presence of their their soundtrack is really important there, and I think kind of going off of that whole idea of just really embracing that musical rhythm gameplay. It looks like it's going to create some really cool gameplay scenarios here.
If you haven't, I would highly recommend checking out Beats Per Minute. It
Mm.
was another rhythm-based first-person shooter, so it's. I mean, I'm starting to work on my own little rhythm-based game in my spare time,
Very
so
cool.
I'm particularly interested in it. Yeah, I mean, again, it's just Doom, 2016. I didn't play Doom Eternal again.
Mhm.
It just kind of passed me by.
Same
It's
here. I
on
played
Game
Doom.
Pass
Doom
though,
said,
so I might. I'll
yeah.
probably once I do hopefully refresh my PC. That'll probably be one of the ones that I played just to really crank it. But that fast paced shooter, Doom already has a rhythm. Like it has like this implied rhythm in how you move about the game. So like
Hmm.
having this thing, having it more codified in a mechanic that you're playing with,
Exactly.
it's just gonna be cool.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was trying to say there. It's like that natural evolution of that same kind of core
Hmm.
concept in that way. And I do want to note that kind of in a similar vein to kind of like demon type slaying type games. Not really the same thing, but I do want to touch a bit on Warhammer 40K Dark Tide that they get an extended gameplay. Briefly show that gameplay as well. But the Warhammer franchise is back. This is a first-person shooter in the Warhammer universe. I'm going to bring this up as well, but just to get a little bit of this gameplay here. I'll skip a little bit ahead probably. Um, yeah, but I'm not sure if have you played Warhammer at all in the past. Warhammer is a game that I've always been aware of, but I actually have not been played the series before.
Are you talking tabletop or video games?
Either way, I know tabletop, it's huge, and I remember
Um,
going to my local gaming store and seeing so much Warhammer tabletop stuff, and like I personally I'm not big into tabletop gaming myself, but I want to be. I mean, I love the idea of strategy gaming. I love the whole thing of crafting your own miniatures and stuff in
yep.
your environment. I think it's super cool. So
I
I've always
have
seen Warhammer, but never really jumped in. And
I have a small Necron army and a small Chaos army that I haven't fully put together. They've been on my back burner for like a year at this point. And more for me, it's a time thing. But I do.
mm,
As getting into that, I did get into a lot of the lore and the story and everything. I played Vermintide 1 and 2,
mm,
which is by the same developer, Fat Shark. Both fantastic games. So you know, I I'm all for this.
yeah,
Again,
same here.
in hindsight, I guess I'm a lot more excited for a handful of the games that were announced or expanded on yesterday than I thought.
Hmm.
But again, I know Fat Shark's done incredibly well with Warhammer games, so I'd love to see their take on 40K. It seems to have that similar like 4-player co-op mission-based game. Hopefully it's something that fits better into my schedule because I can jump on for a half hour, run a map, and just be done and have that nice satisfaction. So I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Absolutely. And I just want to note that game is releasing on September 13th. I believe that's Steam and Xbox only, so no PlayStation or Nintendo there. Not that I expected Nintendo there, but just to point that out. We are going to get wrapping up here with our Summer Game Showcase. We are an hour into the show. I did want to just kind of get through some notables here. Again, I'm not going to be able to go through the whole trailer and discuss for 10 minutes on every game here, unfortunately. But like you said, there were a lot of things that were already announced that we got updates on, and I want to touch on those very briefly. I'm just going to kind of scroll through the article here so that you guys can see my thought process as well if you're on the viewer side. But Saints Row, it got a thing called Boss Factory. So we'll see if we can get this trailer running for a moment as I talk about this. But essentially, they actually did this a long time ago. I remember when I was the Saints Row the third launch was coming out, and I was excited for that game as well. I had played Saints Row 2 at the time, and it was a very wacky game. I was young at the time when I played it, and I thought, it did a lot of things that Grand Theft Auto per se didn't really do. I enjoyed the customization aspects mostly of being able to customize your character completely, have all these crazy skins and crazy customized vehicles. So back in that same vein, Saints Row Boss Factory is now a player character creator that's coming out yesterday. So as of yesterday's showcase, it's out I believe on the PlayStation Store and Xbox Store to download. And you can make your own characters, save them, and then when the game launches later this fall, I believe in August or September, if I'm not mistaken, you're gonna be able to just use your saved characters right off the bat. So I think that's a pretty cool feature. I mean, they're really going all in here on just customizing everything about your character from your style to your vehicles to your play style. So I'm curious to see how this game turns out. Again, it's kind of a big jump and evolution of this franchise but in some ways going back to its really wacky roots in a lot of ways. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out, but did want to note that there was an interesting thing they dropped yesterday, so I thought I would definitely note that for sure. But I think that's pretty. You have any thoughts on that, Ben? As I continue going here,
Saints Row 1 and 2 were better.
That's all I need to hear.
I preferred the slightly more realistic, grounded, but slightly wackier than GTA take.
Exactly.
Story in 1 and 2 were incredible.
I'm here with you there. Yeah.
They're, Saints Row 3 and 4, Get Out of Hell. They were fun, but
Yeah, and I think they got wacky to an extent that it became this just like anything goes craziness. Like you're literally going to heaven and hell. There's alien invasions. I mean, they really go off the deep end of it in a good way. If you would argue that you're into that for Saints Row 4, 3 and 4 really and beyond. But again, I'm with you. The original 2 were kind of my bread and butter. I really liked, like you said, I remember just goofy aspects of the story, but really enjoying. I remember there was that one sword battle. I always remember that sword battle in Saints Row 2 where he pulls out the gun and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna cheat." And he just shoots the. They always had this wackiness to like, but there was always that moral and that kind of like gang warfare and that kind of seriousness of that. But they did have that wackiness where they kind of had fun with it. It kind of, again, I do bring up GTA because there really is no shame in saying that game basically was kind of, let's make a game with a GTA format in our own vision and with some different aspects. And I am excited to kind of see them not to go back on anything per se, but to kind of go back to they're a little less crazy, but still over the top kind of grounded gameplay. So I'm looking forward to that. Another game we've heard about before. This is another franchise that was always near and dear to me, especially when I was younger. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We got some updates yesterday on the game Shredder's Revenge, which is coming very soon. Actually, this had no release date until yesterday, but now yesterday we got not only the release date, but a new character. So I'm going to pull that up here. Oh, I was already there. You're already seeing that. So I'm going to jump right back. But we got the trailer here. We are adding not only Casey Jones and Splinter, but April O'Neil as well as 3 extra characters. So Casey Jones was announced yesterday. Always been a fan of Casey Jones. When I used to watch the Turtles shows when I was younger, I was watching the 2000s cartoon, but then I had to go back and watch all the 80s, 90s cartoon. I was all into it. Had all the action figures when I was younger. I was a big Ninja Turtles kid back in the day. So I'm super excited to kind of go back to these old type of the arcade side scroller style TMT games we used to get a lot of. Turtles in Time is the big one that everybody always calls back to being one of the best TMT arcade games. So I'm very excited for this title. It's actually coming out, I believe June 19th or July 19th. I don't want to get that wrong, but it's coming. I think it's in the next couple of weeks here. So that's very exciting. We didn't have a date on that beforehand, but now we do, which is great. So here that is here. I just want to show that off. June 16th. I want to get that correct. So that's next Thursday. That's a week, less than a week from today. So that's right on the horizon there. I'm excited to jump into that game. I think I'm going to definitely pick that up. But just kind of going through the article again here now. I'm going to keep scrolling. We did get an update on the Cuphead DLC. I don't think we have time to go through that trailer, but I did want to note that Cuphead is a game that I know a lot of people are fans of and enjoy. So you can check out that Cuphead gameplay as well. We got updates on that game, Neon White. We had heard about recently before. It's a card-based first-person shooter, which is a very interesting kind of mashup here. So I'm going to show this gameplay quickly if we can in a moment here. I'll get that started. But I do want to note that there was another game, Flashback 2, which was a long-awaited sequel to the 1992 sci-fi game, which we have not seen anything about this game in 30 years, I should say, really. So this game is coming out, I believe, later this year. But that's a full sequel to that title. But jumping back again to Neon White, I did want to show this gameplay here again real quick. You're seeing this first-person gameplay. I guess restarting here with Flashback 2. Oh, having some technical difficulties here. I think IGN likes to hop to whatever video it wants to play, I guess. But here's Flashback 2. Apologies for that disturbance there. But we're seeing some interesting gameplay shots here. I believe you're going across kind of these virtual platforms here. So I'm curious to see how this gameplay system is going to work out. But again, if I could quickly jump back to Neon White here, we do have that gameplay right above, and that's playing here on the screen. So we do have some sort of anime type base style animations here, but in the gameplay section, which is all I wanted to know here, you get this first person kind of combat no hands, no weapons there, but you did see there you had those card system. So I'm curious to see how this game is gonna play out. I just thought that was a very interesting combination of mechanics, and I wanted to show that. But again, I think we're gonna get wrapped up here with Summer Games Fest. Again, we've been covering it all hour. We still have some more announcements and conferences from yesterday. So I do want to get to that. I do want to lastly note on Fort Solace. This was the last of our kind of stranded on a planet sci-fi type games announcements here yesterday. But I did want to note on this game because we don't know much about it yet. We did get a cinematic trailer here, not much to show. But we do know it's a very cinematic story-based game, and it stars Troy Baker, who is Joel in The Last of Us, and in a ton of games. You probably know his voice acting work from him. Probably one of the most prominent voice actors I could think of in the industry. And Red Dead 2's Roger Clark, who played Arthur in Red Dead 2, so you probably recognize that voice if you're a fan of that game. So that's pretty exciting. That's an indie game there again, but with two huge names on the cast. So I kind of made a joke yesterday. I was watching to myself. It kind of reminds me of like one of those, you gotta get an art house kind of indie film that you can't really. It's not getting a lot of attention, but you get a big actor in there, and boom, you get that at con. You got a lot of attention on that kind of film. So not to detract of anything from that game at all, but I think that there's some two really big names there, so it's definitely gonna get a lot more attention than I think it would have per se if it was just that indie story and just kind of on its own there. But I'm just continuing to scroll through my article here. I really think that's about it for the big announcement Summer Game Fest yesterday. We did get an announcement for one new RTS game that I'm going to show before we get done, and then also one returning game that I want to talk about as well. But as I pull that up here, I do want to see if I can get that video paused to make sure we're not having that same issue here again. So as I pull that up, here we go. This is a game called Stormgate. So this is a fresh reveal from Frostshine Studios. It's an ex-Blizzard dev. So kind of in the same vein as I wanted to touch on this again, like we talked about with the Dead Space remake and kind of a lot of going on with companies like EA and Blizzard and Activision. You see a lot of developers here going off on their own and kind of really developing the vision they wanted to. So this is a game called Stormgate. It essentially has a lot of modern type kind of combat mech type gameplay in more of a fantasy-based kind of universe. So this is a real-time strategy game. I'm very curious to see how this game's going to evolve. I'm sure, like many real-time strategy games, a large competitive community usually is fostered around that. So I'm curious to see how it carves its space into the RTS space here. But again, we're still on the cinematic here. I will jump forward a bit just so we can get more of those aspects of the core kind of combat here. But you see this character does have like modern weaponry. There's a gun on her back, but she's getting this kind of shield. You see these demon type characters here and some of these supernatural elements alongside this robotics and this futuristic technology. So we have this mech like Titanfall like system here where they hop in their mech and they fight these supernatural creatures. So again, another kind of mashup of types of genres, if you would say. Pretty interesting looking game. Again, another all cinematic here. So take with that what you will, but I think this game concept just in general is something very notable and worth mentioning before we hop off Summer Games Fest here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of RTSs. StarCraft style a little bit less so, but I'm still more than glad to give an interesting RTS. Especially, I think they said they're gonna have like 6 factions, so they revealed 2 of them as part of this. The demon guys and the human Terran. So I mean,
yeah, I'm excited too, and I think, like you said, I believe it is a StarCraft-esque type RTS. So I believe that's what we're probably going to be seeing there. But again, we'll have to wait on gameplay and more updates there to see exactly how that game's going to pan out. But I think we're going to end off on a kind of funny one here. This was the last thing I wanted to touch on Summer Games Fest. One where I kind of chuckled at. I went, "Wait, is this something else?" So I'll just lead off with that as we get in. This was Goat Simulator 3. I'm just gonna say it right off the bat. Goat Simulator is a game that anyone knows. It came out a long time back now. I'm not sure why this is not choosing to play, but we'll restart it. We're gonna fight against this IGN video player today as much as we have to during the show. But I'm gonna let that start again. We got a trailer here that was very reminiscent of actually. Oh, let's. Still jumping up. Still the same issue here. But here we got a trailer of very reminiscent of Dead Island. You see this runner here. If you remember Dead Island 2, when that game came out, you had a guy on a jog, his headphones in, and you had zombie chaos behind him. And that was a very memorable trailer. So you have Goat Simulator here, kind of spoofing that Dead Island 2 trailer. but with goat chaos instead of zombies. But I do think I do have a little bit of sympathy for if you're a Dead Island fan at all, because the way this was introduced by Jeff Keighley, he was like, if you're looking for an ocean-based game, don't get bit. He was really hinting at that zombie Dead Island type of theme there to kind of really build that surprise and that joke up. So if you were looking for a new Dead Island game, I'm sorry, that's not what's coming here. We're getting Goat Simulator, not 2, but 3. So they're just jumping over number 2 completely, just to add to the wackiness of the title, I guess. They're spoofing Dead Island 2, but this is the third game for them. So I do think they're just going all in with the craziness, the confusion, the jokes, and they're just going as wacky as they can be with Goat Simulator 3 for their second title here. But that's coming fall 2022. So no 2023 there, but no release date either. So you're not getting any explicit date, but it is coming within the next 6 months, apparently. So we'll see when that drops. Probably going to be PC initial release. I'm not sure if that'll be cross-platform at release per se, but curious to see how that's going to go down. But you have any thoughts? Have you ever played the original Goat Simulator?
I did. I was not a fan. I'll go ahead and say I think Coffee Stain are an incredible group of developers. I mean, their Satisfactory is. Goat Simulator, I initially looked at them kind of like a joke. I didn't like playing up the buggy nature of the game as being part of the game. But I do think as a development team, they have some real talent. Not my cup of tea. Again, there are people that are going to love it. They're going to absolutely love it. And I mean, that's good. I'm glad that they're getting a game they're going to love.
I'm on the same page there. I mean, I played the original game. It was wacky. It was fun. But it's one of those sandbox games where I messed around with it. I kind of got to my limit with it where I messed around enough and then I kind of never went back, unfortunately. But I do think that's the kind of game like that where you can just mess around with an open world. And it seems like a lot of different interactions and different ways you can kind of interact with that open world there. I'm sure a lot of people love hopping on those games all the time and just kind of getting some energy out and kind of just letting that player controller run wild. It really is an opportunity to let like a game all about movement, all about those interactions just run free. So we're going to close off Summer Games Fest there. We have about 15 minutes here left in the show. We're going to try to wrap up in the next 15 minutes here. So I'm going to be very brief in these next 2 conferences I cover because we had 2 smaller conferences yesterday as well after the Summer Games Fest main showcase that went for 2 hours. So again, we covered that in an hour. We put 2 hours into one. I'm going to see if I can put 1 or so hours into about 15 minutes here. We'll see how this goes. So bear with me here. We're going to have to skip over some titles that I really wish we could cover everything, like I said. But again, it's just the nature of the coverage here. But we're going to jump right into this game. Looked really cool. Time flies. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to skip through it, although I really wanted to show that game as well. But that was a very cool kind of sketch-based type of gameplay that I really love all the interesting ideas here we had at Day of the Devs. And I do want to reiterate that this is the Day of the Devs conference. So this appeared right after Summer Game Fest, and this was a platform for a lot of indie games to showcase their progress, which, to be honest, don't get me wrong, I really love Day of the Devs. I wish that some of this maybe was showcased during Summer Games Fest itself. I feel like some of the existing titles maybe could have been, made their way here and had some new announcements for other indie games during that time period. But we did have a few notables here. I really wanted to showcase this one just because it's very terrifying. Again, we did talk a bit about horror games earlier in the show. I'm going to let this trailer load up here for a second, like usual. But this one, this is a game called Choo Choo Charles. It's based off of the Stephen King 2016 children's book. I was actually not aware of this book called Charlie the Choo Choo, which is a horror game based on, a horror novel rather, written by Stephen King. So we have a game based off of that concept where essentially you have a monster train that is after you on your train here. So you can see this gameplay. The player is running from this monster train. It is not on tracks. It's a spider. It's super terrifying. Just a weird kind of monster concept that I think really just was a very crazy image to see here when I was watching a Day of the Devs kind of on my screen. So this kind of caught my eye. And I really wanted to showcase the craziness of this title. So you have your own train here. You can build up your own defenses and your own speed and things like that, and your own defense systems to fight against this horror monster train that's coming after you. That's basically all that I had to say about it, to be honest. I just think it's really a cool visual. I think it's a really interesting concept just in general. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on this as well, Ben.
I do. I love this game. I'm not a horror game person typically, but Two Star Games has a YouTube channel, and I would, if you haven't games development or in this game and this development at all, absolutely go watch his devlogs. I mean, in my opinion, incredibly insightful into like the dev perspective and how essentially one person is putting all this together.
Yeah, and that's what's
So
incredible to me, that it's one person. I think that if we can, like we always love to highlight what goes into development here, of course, at Endless Studios, and I think that it's that's at the core of identifying their not only what excites me about that game, but what excites me about the idea that these developers can be able to make stuff that is this impressive.
mhm.
As time goes on, and we get more and more creative tools, we get more and more of these developers who share their progress and give other people insight. I think as this community grows, we're going to see more and more creativity. We're at no limit of creative people. I think the more and more people that get into gaming and see the possibilities, because there are so many, and again, especially with these two showcases here with indie games, there's so many things that typically people that wouldn't consider themselves gamers per se would really be interested in and really gravitate towards. And I think that the more people that get into indie gaming, especially, and see these fresh concepts that maybe they don't associate with typical games, AAA or not, in the past, is all the better. So again, I'm gonna transition there again from Choo Choo Charles. I don't again, unfortunately, we can't spend too much time on each game, but one other game from Day of the Devs, kind of in the same game I wanted to showcase here, which is a game I personally did see an update for well before this conference ever happened. This game was called, I'm not sure how to pronounce this exactly. It was called Shim or Skim, if you rather. It's SCHIM. But this was a game that I'm about to pull up here. I did see long ago, at least a year or two ago, from the developer themselves on like an internet post. I believe it was a Reddit post that they had showcased their game, saying, "Hi, I'm an indie developer. I built this by myself, but this is my this is my concept here of a game I've been working on. For some time, if you want to give me some feedback." And it was just an innocent post for someone on their own, basically saying, I'm just showcasing my personal game. So for me to see that post and then a few years later now see them at a conference in the same vein, there was very exciting to be like, oh, I know that game and I know that developer, not personally or anything, but I did see that, some of that progress. So this is Shim. I hope I'm saying that right. And essentially, you're jumping from shadow to shadow. So you are this little, I believe you are a Shim. You're a shadow monster, and you're going through the real world through your perspective, which is from the shadow world. So you can see here this gameplay is more so manipulating the environment around you in kind of a puzzle type, turn-based gameplay to fit the proper movement for your character to progress. So you can see throughout here, they jump from shadow to shadow, and then kind of will adjust to their environment, like this person here running, so they have to stick within the shadow of the person running. So there's a lot of time-based, a lot of puzzle type gameplay in this game. I just thought it was a very interesting concept. I really like the visuals of it. I really just love indie games when they have a really sleek visual style like this, and it's a very consistent visual style. So not much more to say about that one as well. I just did want to highlight a couple of the games from Day of the Devs here, like I said, because I really do think we saw some cool stuff yesterday for sure. This is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I had to say really about the whole Day of the Devs, we talked about Last of Us One remake being a safe option, and AAA usually goes the
Mm-hmm.
safer route. So it is exciting to see a lot of these indie games just try some really weird things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it really is where you're getting the more interesting, innovative, out there kind of ideas. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I said a similar thing on our last week's show when I was here. I said that although I was excited for a lot of the more high profile stuff we got there, my two big takeaways from that last show were really, I think, the game Stray, which was not
mhm.
necessarily in the game, but that's published by Devolver Digital. Again, we'll get to that in a second, actually, with Devolver Digital. Or not, Annapurna, rather. I'm going to get to that in a second. We'll get to the Annapurna showcase coming up as well, really briefly. But I do want to move on to Devolver Digital. It's on the tip of my tongue there. That's why I brought it up. What I did want to say about last week was that there was the game Roller Drome at the State of Play, which was probably one of the only indie games shown there. But it was probably my highlight of the show. It was kind of a rollerblading type roller derby combat game that kind of combined these Max Payne slow-mo single player shooting elements with like Tony Hawk skating moves and stuff. So it was a very cool combo there. I just thought that game was very notable, and I wanted to shout that out. But moving on to Devolver Digital, yesterday we got their showcase, and Devolver Digital loves to do their crazy kind of skits at the beginning. I'm not sure if our viewers are aware if they watch the conference, but they love to do a kind of crazy kind of live action humorous type skit at the beginning, and they kind of poke fun at some game industry concepts from time to time, but it's usually pro indie developer, and kind of they kind of tend to spoof some sales practices and things like that. But after their introduction, they got right into the games, and I want to start with a game that was not a Devolver Digital game the last time I saw it, but now is, and I'm actually very happy that they're publishing this game because I think it has so much potential. In a similar light to Roller Drone, this is a game called Skate Story. So this is a game that's combining skateboarding gameplay, which I really enjoyed the Skate series. I really enjoyed Tony Hawk games when I was younger as well. I mean, that was probably one of my first gaming experiences ever, was playing the Tony Hawk Pro Skater game on the PS1, actually. So I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for skating games. This game has really interesting controls. So you actually use both bumpers and both triggers for left and right on each of your front and back feet. And then you have some stick controls in terms of jumping up and off the board. But again, the real star of the show here is the art style and the art direction here. Again, you see there on the screen, you are a demon. You kind of have this like underworld type artistic take on this kind of soul world that you're skating through. I'm sure that the music, the art style, all of this is all going to play into the narrative of this game, of this title. But I just think it's very, very cool art style. I love the gameplay. I think it looks awesome. And I think, like you said, I want to see more crazy ideas. I want to see more crazy combinations of types of games. It doesn't just have to be like we talked about a few weeks back with our sport game conversation of FIFA and Madden and all that we got into. I think we could see more of these out of the box ideas on existing concepts. Like, I think it's just something that I want to see more of. So I think this one's really notable and it's something I really got excited for. I'm really excited to see what this game when it comes out for sure. So it's on. You can wish list it now. I'm not sure we got a release date or anything for that, but very excited for that one. You have any thoughts on that game before I move on to our next one here?
I know he also works, I believe it's with Matt Mearfish on a channel called Thousand Ant. Again, two very insightful people that do game development. I, for some reason, thought this game was already out, but I mean,
so did I. That's why I was confused. I was like, oh,
it looks exciting. Again, just indie games. They're where the interesting ideas are at.
Exactly. I can't agree more. Again, not to discredit AAA as well, but I really love to see these new and exciting ideas. There's one more here I want to show. It's just more so just a new spin on kind of these like hectic combat gameplay. I know we've shown a lot of shooters today. We're gonna kind of end on one. This one was called Angerfoot. So kind of taking off of reminds me a lot of course many games have had kind of a kick mechanic in their first person shooter elements. Fortunately, we're getting a little buffer here in the video, but I do think I want to emphasize that again because we did get. I'm not sure if you played Deathloop earlier this year. It's a game that kind of went. I feel it got a lot of great reviews. It was a game I played because it kind of went a little under the radar for me, but I did pick it up. It had a really satisfying kick mechanic. It's what kind of reminds me of that game. And that game, I feel like the highlights were really the gameplay and just that kind of maneuverability here. So to see an indie game that's all in on this kicking mechanic and apparently is really big on destruction and using that kicking mechanic to affect your environment as well. I just thought it was a really cool art style. I like the action. I like the speed of it. Obviously, a lot of shooter type games yesterday, but one that I really think was probably the one that stood out to me. Again, we talked about the other things that stood out about the other shooters here, but I think this one has its own kind of style and element to it that I think was pretty interesting and notable. But unfortunately, we didn't get too much more from the Devolver Digital Showcase. We did get a few other games that, again, we're running out of time here, so I do want to keep moving on. But I did really like the style of that last title. But our literally last big story here today, before we get into what is, we'll try to give I don't know if we can stay on for another 10 minutes or so here, Ben. But we'll try to give our last kind of predictions for this weekend because we got some stuff coming up as well. But I do want to get some. This one last announcement, which is something of note before we get into this weekend's showcases. We are getting an Annapurna interactive showcase. So this was announced, I believe, yesterday, and it's coming on July 28th. So we're going to look out for that. Again, Annapurna did show some of their upcoming work in previous conferences. We saw them at PlayStation. Of course, I brought up Stray before, which I almost misspoke. They have Stray coming, which I believe is July 19th. So right around the corner. We were waiting for that release date. We got it. So it looks like for them, they're going to show what's on the horizon here. I do want to bring up, just because it's not the best view in this article per se, but I do have the Annapurna site here just because I thought it would be great for people who aren't really aware of this publisher to kind of get an idea for the games I'm talking about. So if you're aware of they put out a lot of prominent indie games in the past that I think are of note to a lot of people. If you remember What Remains of Edith Finch, that Discovery mystery game, or Flower, or games like Gone Home, one of the most popular indie games that I can think in recent, in the recent 10, 20 years or so. I think Outer Wilds, another very popular game right now, Journey and Flower from the same developer, Telling Lies, which is a live action type of interactive game. these are all games that I feel like someone is probably aware of a few of these games. The Pathless and Maquette were both PlayStation Plus games recently. 12 Minutes was a big release earlier this year. Solar Ash as well on consoles. So Stray and Neon White we talked about earlier in the show. So again, a lot of really notable games for this developer and a lot coming up. So I'm curious to see what they're going to talk about next month. Again, that's really about it for there. We did see that game Thirsty Suitors here, I believe, at a PlayStation conference. So I'm curious to see they're probably going to get maybe a release date on that game because that looks kind of imminent. But again, not sure what's going on else at Annapurna, but I wanted to bring that up and kind of give them a little context there for if anyone who's not aware of their catalog here, because they're slowly becoming a very notable developer. Same with Devolver Digital. I think those two should get that namesake out there, especially we talked about Embracer Group a few weeks in the past. They actually had a large investment this week as well, but there are a lot of gaming groups that are becoming bigger, both publishers and acquisitions and things like that I think it's worth noting for sure. It's not just PlayStation, Xbox, and these the big names of yore. We do have a lot of new players here today as well that are kind of in that, not indie space, but in this kind of middle ground of double A indie, if you will, I guess I would say.
Yep. One small correction. Outer Wilds is basically the greatest game of all time. So
I've heard this from a few people now. Now I have to play it because now I heard it from you. Now I gotta go. And I've heard it firsthand. Now I have to play it. I've heard so much positivity about it. I've seen a lot of attention around it recently. I'm just looking at it right now again on their website. I mean, I've heard so many good things, and thankfully I don't know much at all. And I've seen that people have can get spoiled if they look up things at certain locations, the way things go. I'm just gonna hop in.
Absolutely do not look at anything about this because the joy of the game is starting off and knowing nothing and piecing this like grand ballet on like a solar system scale and how things work. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're coming up to about 2:30 my time here. Do you think we could stay for about 10 more minutes here just to wrap this up, Ben? Is that all good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I just want to wrap up here because these were two stories I did really want to touch on. I did want to just say, like I said, we're talking about the upcoming Xbox and Bethesda Games Showcase this weekend. We've talked about that, our predictions for that a few times now, but I think we should one last time because it is this weekend. So, of course, I want to do that right at the very end. But before we do that, it's the last story before that. E3 is announced it will return in 2023. So after all of this Summer Game Fest talk we've just had today, after all of the Summer Game Fest that's coming up, E3 is coming back next year. So I thought this was just something I wanted to note. Again, there's really nothing there else I want to show it in that headline, but I do think it's interesting that they're coming back virtual and in person. Again, we don't know exactly how that's going to be organized in terms of the conferences and who's going to buy in, but I think in the context of Jeff Keighley having the Summer Game Fest and that kind of association with Game Awards and all that, and seeing how that was kind of taking over the mantle this summer, I'm curious to see how that's going to balance out next summer. Again, we kind of got through the Summer Game Fest already. Again, as we've said, a lot of things were already existing, announcements that we already knew about. Again, we kind of had a disclaimer earlier in the week to expect that, but no hate on the Summer Game Fest. I think it was a really enjoyable show, but I think it wasn't the E3 giant summer showcase. I think that that we're used to seeing from the old days of E3, I guess I would say. But I want to see how they're going to restructure now with E3 back in the picture. Is Jeff Keighley going to continue to host this Game Fest, or maybe just do kind of be like that buffer zone for when you don't have a game that can't be at the Xbox conference, it can't be at the PlayStation conference, maybe not the Ubisoft or EA, whoever is presenting at E3 next year. Maybe Jeff could kind of be that place where a lot of maybe indie games or games that just don't have a place to kind of land in another conference that can kind of become just that one show every year, maybe not the whole grander week-long, type of event that it is, and let E3 continue to be that. But that's just my thoughts. I'm curious to hear what you would think about the whole structure of all of this. I just think it's an interesting shakeup because they're both coming back next year. So curious to see.
I don't think E3 has a place in this world anymore. I'll be brutally honest. From a business perspective as a company, it's either cheaper to run your own if you're a big company like Microsoft or Sony. Why Microsoft or Sony would return to E3 when they've got all this infrastructure in place for doing their own thing. If you're an indie or AA, it's probably cheaper to get something put on Summer Game Fest or Day of the Devs. E3, the only thing I could say for E3 is more from a developer standpoint, it might make more sense, or like a journalism industry side of things, E3 might make a little bit more sense. But like from a consumer perspective and from a company perspective, I just don't see why you would go back to E3. You either
Yeah.
run your own show. E3 would have to get insanely cheaper because
Yeah.
at least for the in person portion, like I mean, booths were like dozens to tens of thousands of dollars for a booth on top
Hmm.
of sending staff, on top of paying for all the things you need to be there. It just
Yeah.
why?
And we've had 2 years of kind of, obviously COVID throwing the biggest wrench into the mix, but then also just kind of the adaptation to kind of sticking with things being online, not necessarily when like COVID restrictions were still really limiting an in-person event. It was more so that we spent these 2 years with all these companies adapting to this new way of life and this new way of presenting. And again, of course, you miss out on that in-person aspect. You miss out on what we started the show off with, talking about that demo aspect and that live face-to-face developer kind of interaction, as well as the behind closed doors kind of things that happen in the past where you have companies getting together, seeing games that the public isn't seeing, or maybe making deals behind the scenes about future projects. So you you lose a lot of that physical trade show, going to a conference type energy that comes with the corporate side of that. But like you said, on the consumer side, it's just what live stream are you probably watching from your house, or what way are you consuming this visual content over the internet either way. So if they could do that without buying out an entire stadium at maybe a floor booth, and maybe having all the business expenses, like you said, for sending out all the employees and all the tech setup and everything else that goes along with a giant E3 showcase, I think it's
Yeah,
going to be tough to see who's going to sign with them. And I think if they don't get those big names again, then they're going to have to just concede that defeat again. If for some reason everyone wants to buy back into it, or maybe it's a more hybrid approach, maybe it is cheaper, like you said, maybe they kind of switch up the way they're handling it. I do still see a place for Jeff Keighley, especially I think the Summer Game Fest and Day of the Devs and all that is staying, and I think maybe for E3 to survive, like you said, I feel like that the traditional E3 space is kind of dead, I feel like, going
yeah.
forward. And I think for them to survive, they need to adapt. Unfortunately, it's just a change in times here with the way we've let this digital architecture of it all just kind of stay in place. So hopefully they could figure that out for themselves, but again, for their sake. But I do think, like you said, E3 is kind of, especially after taking this year off, they really are not in a great standing to come back. I'm hoping that maybe some of that push for them can help them. I'm not sure what side I'm on here. I don't really have a stake in the game for wanting one to win out over the other or anything like that. And like I said, I started off by saying maybe we can coexist. Maybe we can all get along here. I hope we can. I wonder. It's really up to the publishers. It's up to the publishers. It's up to the developers on the console side, like PlayStation, Xbox, and their publishing teams, and these grandiose groups that are going to really choose where they want to showcase their stuff. So I think it's really, the power is kind of in their hands for the time
I
being, I
mean,
think.
I'm not even sure who would sign up for it because you have maybe Ubisoft and 2K, like because Activision maybe would have, but now they're going to be under Microsoft, so they'll just be part of Microsoft's. Like, what big names would they have that would draw people there? I mean,
It's
it
tough to think of. I can't think of a big name that doesn't have their own news setup for the way they want
yeah,
to present, and
like
that's why it's tough.
not for them missing the opportunity to capitalize on a digital only E3 and kind of letting Summer Game Fest, Jeff Keighley kind of swoop in and take that spot. I mean, I think that was the critical error, the
Hmm.
the 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 point of failure that
Yeah.
just put E3 in a spot where it can't come back. And not to say that they can't. I mean, they're gonna
Yeah.
try, but I
But you're
mean,
dead on. You're dead on there. That was like a turning point. They really lost a lot of ground there, and that's one of those things that you can't really take back. And they could try to come back from that again, but they were already in rough standings. I
yeah.
think back to not just 2022. I'm
I
talking
mean,
2021, 2020,
Sony and Nintendo had
COVID.
already dropped out
Hmm. Before
before all that.
COVID,
Sony and
yeah.
Nintendo were already dropping out.
So that's why I said it was the biggest wrench, but not the only wrench. E3 was on its way out beforehand, and I think we easily forget that with the way everything kind of changed in these last 2-3 years. But yeah, like they weren't on the best graces with everyone before this even happened. So I think I'm curious to see if they're even going to be able to come back, even if this COVID factor wasn't a thing. But again, like you said, they really dropped the ball when they let everyone else come back and not them this year. I think this year,
Hmm.
again, I of course I want to be sensitive with COVID issues. Again, every COVID is still very much an issue. I'm not downplaying anything like that whatsoever, but I do think that you had an opportunity here, whether it was physical or virtual, to really get your E3 presence there or not. And I think that was probably a misstep that they didn't have that this summer. But again, we're going to get wrapping up here. Like we've been saying, moving on to our last thing we wanted to touch on, which is what is happening this summer, 3 days from now, in fact. And it's the Xbox Bethesda Showcase, which is the next phase of Summer Game Fest. So again, that is June 12th at around 1 p.m. Eastern, probably, I believe that's 10 a.m. Pacific time. So we have less than about 48 hours here to avoid any more leaks, any Last of Us situations like we got with the Game Fest yesterday. So we have some buffer room here. We haven't heard anything. I have no leaked information that may change over this weekend before the show starts. But I do kind of want to solidify our last kind of predictions here. If there's anything wacky, we did talk about a few of our predictions, especially with Bethesda earlier. So do you want to kick that off, Ben, and kind of tell me what you're excited about maybe for this weekend potentially?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be obvious we're going to get Starfield information. I think we'll also get some Redfall information because those got delayed. I think it'd be a missed opportunity not to have something, even just another trailer for both games. I do say though, I think this is going to be huge. I'm going to be on the optimistic side, and I think we're going to get a ton of information because Xbox, I think, over the last few years has made like 11 acquisitions, and the only things we really know about are, a potential Fable remake, Perfect Dark. Obsidian has 2 games about, and the survival game. The name
they have Grounded as well, which is in early access now. Yeah, and like that, it's kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids-esque type built into a game. That game looks pretty exciting as well.
And then we have a few with the Bethesda, but that's like 3 or 4 out of the 11 companies they've acquired. I would be really surprised if we have this full Xbox showcase for like 6 games that we already know about.
And I think you're dead on there, and they're kind of like you said, another turning point. I think, especially for Xbox this summer. Before we get into our predictions, I think we looked at like where they were a few years ago, especially with the whole the Xbox One generation not being their hottest. They needed new titles. They needed a lot. Obviously, their whole acquisition game starts there with this establishment point. I'm kind of setting up here is about couple of years back, I'm kind of thinking here, but I feel like we had a few conferences where, especially at the beginning of Game Pass, where they were like, hey, we're going to have a game every month or so for Game Pass, like back to back to back to back. And obviously everything got delayed. The world kind of flipped on its head. And I think a lot of that kind of got put to the wayside. Again, you mentioned Fable. I believe that game has been in some mixed stages of development. I don't think it's really that far along even now, which is unfortunate because it wasn't that far along when it got revealed multiple years ago. And unfortunately, we've heard reports that they're really not still ready to be showcasing that game soon. So maybe that game is there. Maybe I'm mistaken there. That would be a surprise. But Perfect Dark, which you also mentioned, it seems like it's definitely not going to be there. We heard reports that studio is basically completely flipping over the production of that game and kind of restarting. We don't have. I don't like to say certain words when I speculate on things like that because I don't want to. These are real things happening in a studio that I'm not aware of behind the scenes. So I'm only seeing what was reported on the surface. But that being said, that game is not near ready. In fact, it seems like it's kind of being restarted from the ground up. So 2 things we've heard of. Again, Redfall and Starfield also delayed, so it's not like we're expecting that this fall, but I think those are a must. Again, you're very aware, Ben, of my excitement for Starfield as well as I'm aware for all. I'm sure you're excited as much as I am, and I really think that as much of a bummer that delay was, this is still the opportunity to showcase that game and really get people on Xbox and on PC excited for what's to come. They really need a win this summer. Xbox really needs more, more positive energy going forward. I feel like I've been talking a lot of doom and gloom when it comes to Xbox these past few years in conferences, but I really think that I've always been an Xbox fan. It was my first, again, I said before I played on the PlayStation as well, but I always loved my 360, my original Xbox. I've played so many games on Xbox, so I'm by far still an Xbox fan here. I just think they really they need to come back. They need to come back here. I feel like it's been some time Game Pass has been developing. I love what they're doing there, but we need the games and we need to see what's coming. And I just don't want it to be one of those other conferences where it's like here's everything for the next like 5 years, and then none of it happens. I feel like we're almost like I'm exaggerating here and I'm being very hyperbolic, but from the conferences in the past 3 years, we really haven't seen much of any of that really come to fruition. It's really been a lot more of here's more acquisitions and more things in the pipeline. So let's see what else is in that pipeline. I want to see all of that. I'm excited to see how that's going to come through, but I maybe have some specifics here, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on that as well.
No, I mean, I guess as far as specific predictions, I don't really have any. I mean, like I said, it'd be really weird to have a conference around what would have been like 4 games, but then Starfield and Redfall got delayed. So, like, again, if they don't have something huge, I really question why they're even doing this.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I mean, my prediction is more big picture. State of the K3 information, Redfall, Starfield information, trailers, maybe a 4 or 5 minute clip of gameplay from either or both of those. I would expect to hear something about Fable and Perfect Dark. Probably nothing concrete, but I'd be surprised if they're not talked about at least. But I'm expecting a whole lot of things we haven't seen before.
Yeah, and I think I'm right there with you where most of the surprises are things that we really can't even predict almost. We're going to be like, oh, well, this studio, we can go through the acquisitions, we can go through their studios, we could say whatever they're working on for 10 minutes here. But yeah, it's really a lot of that up in the air. So I think before we close off today, I want to maybe think of some things that maybe could happen this year. Again, this is all hyperbole, not hyperbole, but kind of, speculation here. So take it with a grain of salt. But I do think we did report a few weeks back on that Gears of War collection potentially happening. So I'm thinking a lot about this fall. And if there's not that Starfield this fall, there's no Redfall, what are they supplementing with? Maybe it's like PlayStation. They're playing it safe. Get some remakes out there. Maybe we get that Marcus Phoenix collection of Gears of War. That'd be pretty interesting to have those first 3 games come out in a similar vein to the Master Chief collection for Halo, as we talked about when we reported on that. But that's like one thing that we heard of that maybe that shows up. I'm thinking I had it on the tip of my tongue before and I'm losing it now. So hopefully I can find it before we end the show here, but I had another prediction for this fall, but I do think that there are some things that are missing here. I feel like Obsidian, like you said, we're going to definitely either get a launch date or I hope so, or at least some confirmation on when Grounded from Obsidian is coming out. Cause that's been in early access for some time. Again, I said, for anyone who's not aware on that game, that's kind of like I said, the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids type game. You're a miniature, you're a person who's in a backyard and the grass is huge and all these bugs around you and you're fighting a lot of environmental type, kind of wilderness aspects type elements there.
Yeah, I'd also expect to see something about Everwild, which was Rare's their new game. I think it was announced like 2-3 years ago with like a trailer. Yeah. I'd be surprised if we don't hear anything about it. I pulled up their list of companies that they own currently. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff that could be, but again, it's like In Exile they did Bard's Tale and Wasteland. Could they be working on another Bard's Tale or a Wasteland 4,
or even Fallout? Maybe I think with them, especially when it comes to the old Fallout games, maybe we have that license now with Starfield and with Obsidian filling some gaps maybe for Elder Scrolls in the meantime with Avowed. I did want to bring up Avowed because we haven't seen anything from Avowed in a long time. And that's like a sleeper from Obsidian. Obsidian has a lot of projects. They're one of the most underrated developers. They really are putting out a lot of great stuff in a short amount of time. I mean, we had the Outer Worlds with them, not to confuse with the Outer Wilds, but I haven't played the Outer Worlds yet, but I've heard it's a great RPG in its own right. So I heard it's gotcha.
It's safe.
I've heard good and bad, but yeah, I heard it was
fine.
Gotcha there. But I get that kind of spin off. It's kind of a Fallout vibe. It has that sci-fi element, of course. But I think Avowed, we've talked about Skyrim from Obsidian, that fantasy medieval, I believe it's based in the Pillars of Eternity universe. So I have not played the Pillars of Eternity's games, but I know there's a lot of lore there, and I may have to get into that if I get into Avowed. But that could be something that maybe, or a surprise, comes this year, maybe. I mean, we have no knowledge of that game, really. We did talk about earlier on the analyst report that it was being transferred to Unreal Engine 5, so maybe that's a little optimistic to think that soon after that transition it will be releasing. But maybe it was already well into development on Unreal Engine 4, and that's kind of just, it's not a large, you're not leaving a lot more on the table afterwards. So I'm not sure there, but that Avowed, I would be shocked if we didn't at least hear something about it. But I feel like they could come and save the day, Obsidian, and say, here's our 2022 game, because that Avowed is something I'm very excited for as well.
I do have one specific wild card prediction.
Here we go.
The Outer Worlds 2.
And this is something we heard about.
For that.
I think this is something we heard about, so I think you do have some basis here. I'm gonna verify if you want to check into that. But I think we did get a trailer for a teaser.
Yeah, okay.
The teaser for that. So I don't know if it was that. Yeah, I don't know when that was, but I know I saw that teaser. So I don't know if it's imminent, but I'd love some details on Outer Worlds 2 for sure.
This time last year, during the Xbox and Bethesda Game Showcase, there was an Outer Worlds 2 official announcement. I would be surprised if we don't get at least a release date at this point. I didn't even realize that. So
yeah, and it kind of went by. I think that kind of flew by last year. I completely forgot about it until you said it, and I thought, wait, was there? There was. Like it took me a second to realize it because it was a very quick, not even really cinematic, just kind of a title trailer, just to say this exists. We're working on it. It was kind of like the Elder Scrolls 6 trailer. It's happening. Maybe it's 10 years away again, but it's happening. Outer Worlds, I don't expect that kind of gap whatsoever, but it's one of those where we just got the idea of it. So hopefully we get more on that. I don't know about anything else from Bethesda per se. I mean, like we kind of talked about before, maybe this was before we started the podcast, but about how Bethesda's kind of had to come in here this year and be the savior of Xbox. And then with those 2 delays, now Xbox is kind of, hanging out to dry with no releases. And they were kind of banking on the Bethesda acquisition with games that were already in development to kind of save them this year. So I do want to point it out there that we need to see what's in the pipeline for Xbox, because even with these acquisitions, it was clear that there weren't a lot of the core studios coming out with games this year. And of course there were delays. I'm not going to get into anything like that again, but we do need to see what's in the pipeline there from all these Xbox core studios from before these acquisitions and beyond. But if there's anything else I want to say there, but it's really about it for the Xbox and Bethesda Games Showcase. I did want to close our show off on that because we will be seeing that this weekend. And I'm sure next Endless Report want to hop up with some of those maybe game announcements, probably some Starfield details. I want to have a conversation about Starfield next week. That's what I'm hoping we're talking about next week.
Hopefully the industry can be quiet after Sunday so that nothing else comes up and we just have the whole time to talk about all the amazing things we see.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure there'll be some chatter during the week as well. We'll see what we can fit into next week's show. We always want to give you the most coverage we can. But once again, unless we want to wrap up anything else, I think that's about it for us today. We've gotten our fill in on games. I wish we could talk for 20 hours about all these freaking games. There's so many games I want to talk about. But it is what it is. We're so thankful that you tuned in, as always, to catch up with us on all the latest and greatest news. Again, this is going to kind of be what we're going to be in the format for the next few weeks, assuming these conferences keep giving us more and more game announcements. But then after that, we're going to be back into going into our speculation mode, like always, and looking into these moves from the companies and seeing where things are going for the rest of the year. But on that, I want to say thank you again for watching. This has been episode 13 of the Endless Report, and have a good one. Thanks again, Ben, for joining me. Yep. All right, take care, everybody.